she? No, just kidding.
That's the way she's good. Yeah. The subject is not doing anything.
I know. Yeah.
What happened to it?
Chandra, is this on? It has this red light. What does
Yeah,
that
it's on.
mean?
The red light means it's on, but it's turned this way, not at you.
Oh, okay. May I make a request for people to please come forward a little bit, as much as possible? I don't know why everybody is, a lot of people are not here, not sure why. Chandra, I think this is turned off. Oh, now I turned it
Now I
on.
can see it. Oh, the
Now it turned on. I guess it gets turned off by
yeah,
itself
that's good. It saves
Yeah.
battery.
to save the battery. Okay, so let's start with a small prayer and then we will. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So what we had decided last week was that with the small introduction to some of the key concepts of Vedanta, namely Viveka and all of those kinds of things, we will now begin an introduction to Bhagavad Gita. And in doing so, incorporate some of the concepts of Vedanta as part of the discussion of Bhagavad Gita. Because Bhagavad Gita and Vedanta are not separate from each other. They are one and the same, really. Vedanta is Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavad Gita is Vedanta. And one of the things we had mentioned was that if you recall from the first two classes where we said the basic tenets of Hinduism, if you go back to it, in fact my request to you will be to use this study in a way where you don't forget what was there in the past. It is all a build-up. So you have to use information from the previous classes also. So they're not separate. It's a kind of like a build-up. So one of the aspects of the build-up was the sources of our spiritual knowledge. So if you recall, that was done in the tenets of Hinduism. So one of the things was that the basic source of knowledge and understanding are the Vedas. And the Vedas, of course, has different aspects to it, depending on how far you have progressed in your life. So it has something for everyone. It's kind of like a master's course but it does not forget that there are people who are just starting out. So that's how the Vedas are. And this will be an important element in the Bhagavad Gita also. So there we saw that the Vedas are divided, sort of segmented, not divided, but segmented into a karma portion and a knowledge portion. Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda. And the Karma Kanda and can be taken as pure karma, pure action. Like, for example, supposing we do something in our life for accomplishments, then karma is involved for the accomplishments. You want to do something, you want to gain more money, more knowledge, whatever it is. So you do karma for that reason. So that part of the karma should be considered as acquiring something that you don't already have. This is the nature of our life. Really, we are, let me turn this thing on, I'm sorry. I forgot to turn this on. So anyway, so the normal utility of karma is to employ it in gaining something that you don't already have. This is the normal way of doing karma. But then, for people that understand a little bit about the spiritual progress in life, the Vedas and also the Bhagavad Gita point out that you need to view your life slightly differently. How? I'm just repeating myself. Instead of looking at accomplishments in life that have yet not been accomplished, you have to view accomplishments that are already accomplished. Praptasya praptihi. You call praptasya praptihi. The sense of completeness, the sense of freedom, the sense of independence that we are all seeking is in fact already there but not appreciated. This is what is called praptasya prapti. So this becomes the subject of the second part of the Vedas called Jnana Kanda. And if that is the case, that for people who are very serious about understanding how to gain happiness in life, how to permanently gain, not temporarily gain, in that case, the karma plays a modified role. If you recall the examples that I had given, that once I understood that my credit card is not truly lost, it is there in the house, in the room somewhere, but I just have to find it, then my karma changed its form. This is a good example to see. Because if I thought that my credit card was truly lost, then my karma will depend upon calling people up perhaps getting into the car, going to the restaurants or to wherever I had gone that day for shopping, and knocking on the doors and saying, have you seen this credit card that I may have left? This is part of the karma. However, if I find out that my credit card is not really lost, but I cannot find it yet, but it's there somewhere, because if you recall, the example was that which is a real life example, that I had used it for making a credit card purchase on the phone, or maybe on the computer. So I knew that I had it there. This gives me a great degree of peace and happiness. And I still haven't found it. But you can imagine the worry that is no longer there. Similarly to that is the teaching of Vedanta. When you get the idea that the source of happiness is not outside of you, it is something to do with who you are, then you relax. And then the karma, because you haven't found it yet, only the Vedanta is telling you, only the Shastra is telling you. But the karma required to understand this is different. It's modified. It is very different. Because what it is now, how is it possible that I don't get it? How is that possible that I don't get it? I should be able to get it. This is called karma in a modified form, which in the Bhagavad Gita will be called karma as a yoga. Anyway, I'm just giving you the introduction that the basic source of this vidya is the Vedas, and Bhagavad Gita is part of what is called Smriti. The Vedas is part of what is called Shruti, and Bhagavad Gita is part of the Smriti. And the difference between them is that the Bhagavad Gita translates the Vedas for us. So this talk is all about introducing you to the Bhagavad Gita, the very structure of it, and then also to show you that it is not any different from the basic form of Vedanta. It is really the same. There's not a different topic or anything. The only thing is, Bhagavad Gita specializes teaching Vedanta to an active householder person. So if you, for those of you that may be familiar with it, in our in the Hindu way of looking at life, there are 4 stages in one's life, what are called ashrama. Ashrama means a stage. 4 stages of one's life. So the first stage is called brahmacharyam, or the life of study. In fact, it's interesting that in our teacher, Swami Dayanandji, used to say that at this stage, the children should not have to earn money. So we disagree with some of the Western thinking where people say that the children should, not now, in the old days, they would distribute paper in the neighborhood so they can get some money. So you teach them how to earn money and to save it. In Hindu way of thinking, that's not proper. The students should just study without any encumbrances. So this is the first stage of life, which is called brahmacharya. And look at in the ideal 4 stages was 25, 25, 25, and 25 years. So the study for the first 25 years is brahmacharya. Then the second stage, which is what the Bhagavad Gita is meant for, is what is called grihastha. So grihastha means tied to a single home. And in this one, you do several things. You now translate what you have learned into some profession. So it is very possible that you may be an engineer, you may be a scientist, you may be a doctor, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But whatever you have learned, you now turn this into a vocation, number one. The second thing is that you develop a family. So marriage is very important in this, in the second part of this stage. And so you now replicate your own self with others, help children to grow. The third thing is to provide a home where everyone feels at home. And the last one is that you turn your karma into a karma yoga, which we will discuss in more details in a minute. So this is the features of the second stage of life. And the Bhagavad Gita is aimed at this stage of life. Ideally speaking, from 25 to 50. I mean, give or take some, that's not that important, but just this is the stage. And also another thing as part of this stage is that in this stage you will see a lot of problems, conflicts, competition, and you should anticipate that. Because in the first stage, you are dependent on someone for studying. You don't have to worry about money. You don't have to worry about conflict. There's some, but nothing much. And later on in your life, conflicts recede in the background. But in the second stage of your life, conflicts and competition are a big part of the life. You may lose your job. You may not have enough money. You may have to transport your whole family from one side to the... All kinds of things happen in the second stage of life. And the reason I say that is, I'll explain it to you. The setup of the Bhagavad Gita is a warlike situation. And the setup of the Bhagavad Gita is extremely well designed, as I'll explain to you even further. One part of that which I can now say is that in the second stage of your life, life is like winning a war. It seems like things are pressuring you in a lot of different directions. So this is the second stage. And I'll come back to it in more detail, but let me finish the last 2 stages. The third stage in Hinduism is what is called Vanaprastha. In Vanaprastha, the key features are starting to disengage. The retirement, in essentially what is called retirement, is disengagement. lessening of conflicts, not having as many attachments. And in fact, it's interesting, our teachers used to say this. This is a great piece of advice, something easy to understand. He said that in Vanaprastha, the key element of your conduct with others is friendship, not attachment. And it's interesting, for married couples, this doesn't happen that often, but it should happen. So what happens is that in the active parts of your marriage, I'll contrast these two things, okay? One is friends, and the other one is attachment. So just look at this. The way you and I talk to friends has a certain way. How are you? You're very polite, and you laugh a lot, and you kid each other. This is what friendship is all about. Okay? They said, please, in this stage, start to treat your spouse as a friend. We don't do that. We have less tolerance for our spouses than for our friends. We expect more from them. We behave differently. We are rougher on them than to our friends. And so the Vanaprastha, in short, is an opportunity for us to start to disengage, and the goal should be, and the spouse is only one of them, another one is children. It is appropriate when the children are growing to be firm with them, to be attached to them. But as the life progresses, and certainly in Vanaprastha, you should treat your children as your friends. Treat your spouses as friends. And in fact, that is what characterizes. You are still engaged with the society. You're not really completely off of it, but it's a softer form of living. This is the third stage. The fourth stage is what is called sannyasa. And this we will talk about in more detail as the teaching goes. But this sannyasa means, just leaving the society. And so here, I'll very briefly mention it for now, and then go on. We are not talking about leaving the home necessarily. If it has to, fine. But the more important one is an internal sannyasa. Internal renunciation. Sannyasa means renunciation. Means that you have now reached a stage in your life where even you have friends or you don't have friends, whether children are nice to you or not nice to you, the spouse is good or not good, doesn't matter to you. You've reached a stage of independence. You've found another source of solace and peace within you. This is what is called inner renunciation. And of course, it also means you're not dependent on trivial things in your life to make you happy. You are okay. So this is the scheme of life. And this is the infrastructure for you to grow. So the whole life is taken to be a infrastructure for making progress. And if you should, if the body should expire before this happens, the next life gets a little better. And ideally, the study of the self allows you to finish the objective within this life itself. And if it doesn't happen, then you may have to take another one. But the objective is that within the life, you have making such progress that by the time you become a sannyasi, it is a real sannyasa. Now, the other thing that is said is that if you have studied a lot in one's life, in one life, and you could not complete this understanding and your body falls, chances are that in the next life you will not even enter into grihastha. You will remain as a student, and this is what happens. You find there are people who see that going through this whole thing is not necessary. I am alone in the beginning and I stay alone in the whole life. And these are the people that it doesn't happen in the West as much, but in the East, if you look at Swami Viditatmananda, Swami Paramarthananda, a lot of these people, they said, I am not going to get married because that means that I have to have responsibility for a family and so on. No, I want to pursue this with myself, just by myself. So they are straight away going into, they become sannyasis from the very beginning. But that happens very rarely. It doesn't happen that much. The normal thing is the progression of life, as I mentioned before. Okay, so having said that, now let us go into Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is a treatise specifically mentioned for the Grihastha ashrama. That's why it is so well regarded. Number one. Now we go into another aspect of the setup of the Bhagavad Gita. So here's the situation. Supposing one's character and one's culture is such that I am not a good person. I'm not ethical, I'm unethical. And I am bordering on criminal. I lie and cheat. And I have problems, and I have anger. And I have lots of desires, and so on and so forth. I'm just giving a picture of a person who's not considered to be a good person even in the society. Then what is necessary for such a person is to go through the pain of suffering through the life. You will be going across problems, you may be jailed, you may have, if you've been drinking too much, you may have to go through some therapy, all kinds of things. Bhagavad Gita is not meant for you. It's not the main thing to study. There are other things that you should do, and society will take care of you. If you're not a good person, then you need to learn to be a good person in the society itself. Bhagavad Gita is not meant for you. However, suppose you are a good person. And good person means one who is friendly, ethical, struggling nevertheless, but still having good moral structure, and so on and so forth. Number one. And yet you are not happy. It is not necessary that all good people are happy and all bad people are unhappy. Both are unhappy, but for different reasons. A bad person is unhappier because of obvious reasons. You get angry at small things, and a good person also is not very happy, but not because of obvious things. But there is a certain discomfort in our life as to what is it that I'm doing? Where am I going? So therefore, Bhagavad Gita is meant for that person. And in fact, you will see that the character of Arjuna, who is the student in the Bhagavad Gita, is carefully drawn with this profile in mind. What profile? He is a good person. He is well regarded. He is a leader in society. He is very ethical. He is well adjusted. He's a very skilled person. Despite that, he is not happy. This is the character of Arjuna. But problem?
Yeah, I'm able to hear there.
Stop it.
Yeah, well, this wasn't on.
Again, I think it turned off.
Yeah.
It turns off. It's interesting. Yeah, we need to find out why it, because it was on when I started.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was on.
Oh. You turned it on, right?
Yeah, I turned it on.
Hmm.
So, anyway, somebody can just raise a hand and then I'll press it again. So that is the profile of the person to which the Bhagavad Gita is addressed to. So this has to be kept in mind. Now, another thing that is presented in the Bhagavad Gita is that Arjuna, as I mentioned before, in the Grihastha ashrama, is facing a warlike situation. And that means sometimes in our life we get into a lot of pressure to make decisions on one kind or the other. Here, in this context of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is conflicted because of two things. He's in conflict and he's in pain. In fact, he's ready to have a mental breakdown. It is a very serious thing that is happening to him because of two things. One is that he is the leader of the Pandavas, who are very good people. They all do the right thing. The whole society is very well maintained. They never do anything which is out of the wrong, and so on. These are the Pandavas, and he's the leader of them. He's one of the leaders of it, very skilled. And naturally, he is asked to protect their interest because there is a war going on between the good people, Pandavas, and the not so good people, which is Kauravas. And the Kauravas are making life very difficult for them, and they have bent over backwards to accommodate them, but they're saying, we cannot do that anymore, we have to go on a war with them. So this is one side of the emotion that is tugging at Arjuna, namely the fact that he is protecting the Pandavas' dharma, what is called dharma meaning the righteousness of these people. He is protecting them. Now comes the other side. What he finds is that the people that he is fighting, people from the Kauravas, have some of the very wise people that have brought him up. They were his very teachers. They're the very war-skilled people that taught him all the skills that he had. Elderly people, ones that he has a lot of respect from, and they're on the other side. So as a result of this, he is torn between these two emotions. Should he protect his own people, or should he protect the lives of people that he has respected all through his life that happen to be on the wrong side for lots of different reasons that we can go over later? As a result of that, he has become mentally broken down. And this is the context in which the Bhagavad Gita starts. And this is tantamount to many of the things in our life where I have to propel myself to not just go with my normal life, but I need to pull myself off because I'm facing a huge problem. This is the situation that Bhagavad Gita is pointing out. Anyway, so having said that, one other very interesting thing that is an important thing to point out. So there was a king in this whole era called Krishna. The Krishna is forgotten that he has a kingdom of his own, and quite a large kingdom with, I forget how many warriors he had and how many people that he had, but he was a very successful king. And also considered to be a very wise person. Not only a king, but he was a very wise king. And in fact, obviously, because he was an avatara of Ishvara. He was an avatara means that he was brought in by Ishvara specifically to fulfill certain things. So the wisdom was his from the very beginning. He was like a rishi. And many of the people knew that he is an extraordinary person. A lot of the stories about him and so on and so forth were such. Not only was he a successful king, but he was also a very wise king. So here's the second thing that happened. At the beginning of the war, both Duryodhana, who is the leader of the Kaurava, and Arjuna, who is the leader of the Pandavas, approached Krishna for help. And it turns out, they said that, as the story goes, that Krishna was asleep when both Duryodhana and Arjuna approached him. And when he got up, the first person he saw was Arjuna. And both of them said, he told both of them, "Why are you here?" So he says, "We want your help. We both of us want your help, and we want you to be on our side." So he said, "Well, the only thing I can think of is, I will give you both a choice. the first person that I saw when I woke up was Arjuna. So he goes first. And here's the choice that I give you. One of you will get me as the person to advise, and the other person gets my entire army to fight on your side. This is what I have to do. So now Duryodhana was very sweaty because Arjuna got the first choice. Arjuna did not even blink an eyelid. He said, I want you. Duryodhana said, oh my God, so wonderful. What a stupid idiot. What is he going to do with one person? I get 17,000 of his, or something, some big number. So both went back happy. Okay? There is a big lesson in this. The lesson is that numbers which stand for accomplishments, power, is one thing. And the wisdom of the wise person is something else. Whenever possible, go for wisdom rather than accomplishments. Wisdom meaning, think about what you're doing. Is this giving you the happiness? Accomplishments? Just hurtling through your life, accumulating money, accumulating this, is this the right thing? Should you not inquire into the deeper aspects of what life is all about? This is what wisdom is. And given them, your focus should be to think rather than to do. This is one of the starts of the Bhagavad Gita, that it happened. Okay, having said that, we can now go into the structure of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. I think many of you already know it, but I will point out some of the aspects that you may not know. I'm not sure. So, the Gita consists of 18 chapters. Okay, but I can't remember, I think 700 verses or something like that. 18 chapters. And it can be looked upon in various ways. There are lots of aspects of examining the structure of the Bhagavad Gita. And I'll describe them now. What are the various aspects that you should be looking at? Regardless of the aspect, the fundamental lesson of the Bhagavad Gita is the same as the Vedas. So this is what is called, in Sanskrit, called Tatparya. Tatparya means the essence, the real purpose of the teaching. What is the core of it? What is the Tatparya? What do you mean? This is what the meaning of the word Tatparya. So the Tatparya of the Bhagavad Gita, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita is the same as the essence of the Vedas. And what is that essence? The essence is called Tattvamasi. This is the Mahavakya, this is the great sentence, that you and that, Tvam means you, and Tat means that, are one and the same. You and that are one and the same. U stands for the individual, you like you and I, having a personality, having a body, living person is what is described as you. That is what God is, what the whole creation is, and something that may not be clear to you. That's why it is called that, not this. So that means something which may not be present, you may not be able to see it, but there is something that you have to see eventually. So that is indicated by the word that. So that is what is called tat. And then comes the equivalence of those two. Almost identity between them. Your essence and the essence of the whole creation. Another thing to look at is what is called microcosm and macrocosm. So the essence of the microcosm and the essence of the macrocosm is really the same. This is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. And we will go into this in more detail later on, but let me proceed on one other explanation which will clarify this equation. And the equation is that Jivatma, which is the individual, is the same as Paramatma, the macro Ishvara. Jivatma is really Paramatma. And this apparent disparity, how can they be the same? Can be taken as an example, can be seen as a simple example. It is said that the room space is the same as the total space. The room space is an enclosed space, seemingly enclosed by these four walls. And the total space is one where the walls are included in the space. It does not include this. It does not limit the space. The space is the total space. And the two are one and the same. It's just a way of looking at it. And so this is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. So there, having said that, one way to look at the aspect of the Bhagavad Gita, the 18th chapters, is the first 6 chapters detail and highlight the microcosm, which is the individual, the Jivatma. First through the 6 chapters. The second 6 chapters, 7th through the 12th, highlight the Paramatma. And the third 6 chapters, 13 to 18, highlight the identity between the Tvam and the Tat. So the Bhagavad Gita really is an explanation of the two sides. It's a solution to an equation. I think we have done this before in one of the earlier classes. An equation is one which doesn't appear to be the same, but upon solving it, it becomes equal. Like, for example, 4 is equal to 4 is not an equation because it is obvious. What are you telling me? He says, I want to prove it to you that 4 is equal to 4. What does that make? 4 is equal to 8 is not an equation. But 4 equal 8 minus 4 is an equation. Because the two sides are different. You try to teach this to a 3 or 4-year-old and you will see. They'll look at the two things and says, why? They don't, what do you mean the minus and 8 and so on and so forth? But it can be solved. Similarly, from a spiritual standpoint, what are you saying, Ari, the Jivatma is equal to Paramatma? I don't get it. It can be solved to be the same. And so the essence of that is this. What you think yourself to be a limited person is not true. Your identity at this point is very much focused on the 4 walls. And you are viewing yourself with respect to the limitations which are not yours. Instead, you should see yourself to be the total space, Paramatma. It's just a shift in identity that has to be learned. So this is the meaning of praptasya prapti, acquisition of the already acquired. This is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. This is one way to look at the 18 chapters, is that there's a problem here somewhere, and it should not turn off. This is the way the Bhagavad Gita is structured, one way to study, okay? There are lots of other ones. Now, the first chapter simply defines the context of the Bhagavad Gita, which means the story of the Pandavas and Kauravas, and also the pain of Arjuna's decisions. It's called Arjuna Vishada Yoga. In fact, the word yoga is used for all the chapters. So yoga has different meanings, but in this context means a topic is called a yoga. So topic is Arjuna Vishada Yoga, means the topic of what really troubles him. What's his conflict? Why is he broken down? What's his problem? And the first chapter and the 10 verses of the second chapter detail Arjuna's wailing in front of Krishna. And Arjuna is saying, I'm not a happy person. And I don't know why I'm in this position. So Krishna says, why? What's the problem? Why aren't you happy? He says, listen, I've got these two conflicts. On one side I've got dharma to protect. On the other side I've got these elder people that I'll be killed. What am I going to accomplishing? I'm just thinking the whole life is just ruining my way of thinking. And I don't know what to do. And in fact, I just want to quit. I don't want to fight anymore. So Krishna lets him talk. Anything else? And he goes on and on. He describes it. Don't you see my conflict? This is very simple. How would you do it if you were in my place? So this is up to the 10th verse of the second chapter. It's called Arjuna Vishada Yoga. The teaching begins with the 11th verse of the second chapter. Because at this point in time, Arjuna is a war-like situation, everybody's ready, and he's supposed to be one of the leaders, and he is broken down in tears, he's sitting down, he's taken off all of his armor, and he says, I am not going to go through with this. And Krishna says, why? So he gives him all the logic. He says, you think I'm just emotional? I'm not. I'm just telling you this is the wrong thing. But I still don't know what to do. And then there is an important verse which says, Arjuna tells him, but I know you are a wise person. Can you please lead me out of my difficulties? I am your student. So this also points out an important thing. What it points out is that unless a person asks for this knowledge, don't give it to them. I cannot go outside to we send out an ad once when a new text is given. But I don't expect hordes of people to come. This is not something you can just tell people, hey, I'm my own family. I cannot get my own sons to listen to me. Forget about anybody else. If I give everybody maybe $10,000, they'll say, okay, I'll come. But they'll be watching their cell phones while they're... It cannot be done that way. On the other hand, it says that if someone asks for it, you better give it to them. Anyway, so Arjuna, in the process of breaking down, he says, please help me. I don't know how to resolve this. Tell me what I should do. Shadi mam prapannam means that I am your student. Then the teaching begins on the 11th verse. And in the 11th verse, there's so much commentary on all this goes on. A lot of people have described this. Krishna admonishes him. It is the closest thing that Krishna comes to admonishing it. But in the 11th verse he does. And essentially he says, do you know something, Arjuna? You talk like a wise person. And you've explained your doubts to me in such logical way and so on. You talk as though you know what you're talking about. But let me tell you something. You're a fool. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. This is the worst thing that you can do. You don't even know you are a fool. You talk like a wise person. Ashocyan anvashochastvam pragyavadam subhashase gatasun agatasun cha nanuposhocanti pandita. You're talking about killing people and this, that, or the other. There is no killing. It just seems like it. They've already been done. I've already created this whole thing is a drama. You're not doing it. You're just a puppet in my hand as an Ishvara. Anyway, he admonishes. And just like saying, stop it. And then calms down. And he was already calmed down. It's not as though it was a real anger, but it was a feigned anger. You know, there is a difference between real anger and feigned anger. Sometimes this is what happens when you have children and the husband and wife, the child misbehaves and the children and the parents are not really angry, but they have to be angry just to show, they say. They sometimes it happens, husband and wife say, okay, you do it. Why should I be the bad person? So they say, okay. So one of them says, okay, I was telling you, this is a wrong thing for you to do. I cannot take it anymore. Inside you're laughing. It's not a real anger. So Krishna was like a feigned anger. He says, you're a fool. Why are you doing things? Talk like a wise person, but you don't understand a thing about it. Then he proceeds to talk and gives him the what needs to be, how he should think about it. So another aspect, I'm still talking about the structure of Bhagavad Gita. So another aspect of the Bhagavad Gita is that the second chapter and the 18th chapter, so the second chapter is the beginning, because the first chapter is simply giving the context. That's just story, here's the story, here's what it is. So really the teaching begins in the second chapter and it ends in the 18th. So the two bookends are summaries of the whole Bhagavad Gita. Even in our everyday context, it says that a person who is a very good articulate speaker, when you give us some kind of a speech, what you should do is to tell everyone what you're going to talk about. Then talk about it, and then summarize in the end. He says, this is what I want, this is what I talked about. This should be the effective way to communicate. So the Gita does that. Second chapter, he says, this is the entirety of what I'm going to talk about. Then through the 3rd through the 17th chapter, it goes into the details. And in the 18th chapter, he says, now that you've seen it, I just want to summarize it. The 18th chapter is considered to be very long, it's a very long one. But the words used are only meaningful if you have studied the other 17 chapters. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. And really, in some way, I think the 62nd or 63rd verse, it ends the whole thing where he says, Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarva papebhyaha na shochya, something like that. So the essence of that is, arhasi, something like that. Shochitum arhasi. No, it says shochya. I have it here. Hold on a second. What is with this? Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarva papebhyaha moksha ishyami ma shucha. Number 66. So the essence of that is that this is the summary of what he's talked about. It says that instead of focusing on further accomplishments, sarva dharman, so sarva dharman here means sarva karman, as the commentators have provided. Sarva karma means that instead of focusing on all the external accomplishments, trust yourself that you are alone enough to give you happiness. You don't need any external sources of happiness. You are the very source of happiness. Mamekam. So Mamekam here means not Ishvara. You can even take it as an Ishvara, that you please trust Ishvara. But the best form of Ishvara is the Atma which we already are. So that's what it is. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. He says, ahantva sarva papebhyaha. I will make sure that any residual problems that have occurred because of your previous doings will not bother you. Anyway, this is an advanced topic. I don't want to really just talk about that. So anyway, so that's another way to look at the 18th, the Bhagavad Gita, which is the 2nd chapter and the 18th chapter are the bookends, and so on. So this is how the Bhagavad Gita presents the concepts of Vedanta to the student. And here, the two main elements that we should keep in mind as we are studying this are the two elements called Viveka and Vairagya. We talked about a little bit in the previous class also, but this is an important thing for this. Viveka and Vairagya. So Viveka we have already spent quite a bit of time on. If you recall, I gave you examples of Viveka. And Viveka means a particular form of thinking that is involved in distinguishing two things that look alike. Two things. So here, it is not a general thinking of many mixed up elements which form vichara, which is called vichara. Vichara means general thinking. So, as we have talked about it before, who should we vote for? Which candidate? Should be Democratic, should be Republican? Should we vote for Trump? Not Trump. If not Trump, then who else should we do? This is called vichara. And lots of different things. Should we get out of Afghanistan? Should we stay in Afghanistan? And Chinese, all those kinds of things. It's called general thinking. But Viveka means the ability to discriminate, to distinguish between two things, not multiple things. And in fact, this is interesting that in the teaching of the Vedas, the multiplicity and the confusion of different things is slowly brought into a binary format. How so? Because the way the solutions proceed, it would say, okay, start with this. Should it be this or should it be that? And you should make the right decision. You say it should be that one. Okay. In that case, should it be this or should it be that? I think in all cases in binary format. And life becomes much easier. You can make a lot of progress that way. Anyway, going back to the fundamental aspect of Bhagavad Gita, just to be kept in mind, is that I need to develop a heightened sense of viveka. And as we saw that in the examples that we saw earlier, that if you're watching a movie, then you should know that this is just a movie. If you're watching a play, then you should know this is just a play. And so if you're unable to distinguish it, then you have problems. And the example that we were talking about in the earlier class also, this is a real life example that if you have an animal, a dog is used as an example because some of the other animals are very passive. But a dog can bark and bite. So if you put a dog in front of a mirror and you watch the expression of the dog, it gets very confused. And in fact may start barking on the other one. Why? Because it cannot tell whether the other dog is real or not. It looks very real, and you don't want to dogs don't like to be challenged by other dogs. So he can start barking. This is a classical case where the dog's intellect cannot distinguish between a real self and an image. And for the same reason they say that parents should not show mirrors to very young children, because it confuses them. It makes them go, what is going on? It takes a while for the child to understand that this is just an image. It doesn't mean anything. So that's another case of a lack of viveka. You see? The fact of the matter is, this is what we are going to see in more detail. My giving reality to the world is due to lack of viveka. Atma is the real self, and the world is a lower form of reality than me. This is the viveka that I have to develop. I'm not convinced about it at this point, which is okay. I don't get it. How can that be? Others look at also the same as me. And so here what is said is, the context is important. We're not saying that you as a living individual is a higher reality than other living individuals. We're not saying that. But you as the consciousness is a higher reality than either one of these two living individuals, you or someone else. If this looks like a very strange thing, the simple example is that a wave of the ocean who is troubled and says, I am very finite and I'm going to disappear and there's going to be a huge problem and other waves are bothering me, is told, you got it wrong. You are not a wave, you are the water. Don't you see its misplaced identity? And if you understand it, then it's not as though the other wave is a lower reality than you, because the other wave is the same reality as you as a wave. But the other wave, as well as your own waviness, is a lower reality than you as a water. This is what we have to see. At this point in time, I cannot distinguish. I see myself as a human being. I see others as a human being. And we get into conflicts. It's like a dog barking, really. We're like a dog barking, not realizing that there is no other dog. And so this is Viveka. And so, what I was saying earlier is that in the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, these two concepts, which is Viveka and Vairagya, are to be kept in mind. All throughout, Viveka, Viveka, Viveka. At every stage it will be shown. Don't you see this is a lower level? Don't you see? That's why we talked about ontology, which is a level of reality, that is an mithya. We talked about that. So this is one thing. Then comes Vairagya. And Vairagya means the ability to make sure that the Viveka is effective. In fact, Vairagya is a confirmation that you have Viveka. Like suppose you're looking at yourself in the mirror and your image looks exactly like you. And there is a person who says, would you like to have coffee this morning? If you say, yes, I want 2 cups, one for me and one for my image, that means you don't understand. You don't understand that one is not capable of drinking coffee. If you drink coffee, then your image is automatically drinking coffee. You don't have to have 2 cups of coffee. So Vairagya means a confirmation of the fact that I am understanding the difference between the higher reality that I am and the lower reality that is given in my body-mind complex. And if I do not understand it yet, we're not saying that you're a fool that you should be getting this Viveka right away. But you should be aiming towards that. And if you don't have that Viveka yet, then it will be obvious that you do not have Vairagya. It will be obvious. Why? Because you will be very concerned about your body-mind complex. You will be very concerned about trivial sources of happiness that give you happiness. You're going to, every time you pass through an ice cream shop, you will go for it. You will say, I have had a troubled life, ice cream is a very beautiful thing. It's universal, that it removes your samsara for 5 minutes. You may be having lots of problems, this, that, or the other. You may be about to lose a job, and your daughter has broken up with her boyfriend, and so on and so forth. So you go into Haagen-Dazs, and for 10 minutes, all of that recedes in the background. So if you do this very often, that means your Vairagya shows that you don't have Viveka yet. So, therefore, the entire Bhagavad Gita consists of these 2 elements that have to be kept in mind. And So in and through the various different verses will be these two things. A teaching of Viveka and a encouragement to do Vairagya. This should be kept in mind. This is how it will be. And so Krishna again and again will say. So for example, in the end of the second chapter, which is of course the culmination of the, as I mentioned, it's a summary of the whole thing. Arjuna asks him, this sounds very interesting. Arjuna says, wow, you've given me a very good insight into the freedom and I really appreciate it. Can you tell me, how will I see someone who has reached this stage? So he says, Sthita Pragyasya ka bhasha. We start with a section which is summarized at the end of the second chapter called the Sthita Pragya section. Sthita Pragya means one who is, this is what is normally talked about as a realized soul. In the Indian context you will see this. Who is a realized person? That for that reason Swami Dayananji was shy of using the word realized. It should be just one who is a wise and who's understood the whole thing. But somehow the thinking is that all of a sudden this lightning will strike me, I will become realized. So Arjuna also asks him the same thing. He says, Krishna, this all looks very good, but tell me, if I see a person, how will I know that he is realized? It is a very interesting thing. In fact, so this starts with, in this context, in number 54, Arjuna Uvacha, Sthita Pragyasya ka bhasha, Samadhi sthasya Keshavaha, Sthita dhihi kim prabhasheta kim asit vrajeta kim. He says, tell me Krishna, how will I recognize? How does he talk? I just want to tell you what life is all about. Does he talk like that? And how does he sit? These are not just ideal things. People think that a person who has reached doesn't move. It doesn't move means what? He has to go to the bathroom now and then. Does he have to do? No. So then how does he just sits like this? And if there are flies on his face, he doesn't feel that. That is a realized person. So he has all these kinds of crazy ideas that he says, tell me, how will this person look like? How does he walk? Vrajet means how does he walk? How should I be able to do that? And the answer to this, Krishna answers him very interestingly. He doesn't answer. In fact, so he says, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmani ev atmana tushtaha stita pragyastada uchyate. He sidesteps the question completely. So Arjuna says, wait a second, you didn't answer my question. I'm asking you, how does he walk? How does he talk? And you have not even answered that. It just means this is a ridiculous way to understand who is a happy person. Doesn't matter. He says the whole thing is whether you are dependent on outside thoughts, you are so dependent on things happening to you, you don't have an understanding of the freedom that you are yet. But once you do, it doesn't matter how you talk, what you do, or anything. This is what is called inner renunciation. It is not the outer renunciation, not the kind of clothes you wear, or the length of your beard. I see these pictures of these Vedanta teachers, and one interesting thing is they're always looking like up on the top, like this. That I have a vision, I'm seeing God, and they have all these kinds of things and so on and so forth. Has nothing to do with it. You can be walking around as a householder, whatever it is, but it depends on where your inner freedom is. Are you dependent on things outside of you? Then the Vairagya has not yet happened. So I'll just finish this class with this, that this is the structure of the Bhagavad Gita, and this is how it proceeds. Both the Viveka and Vairagya are kept in mind throughout, and then the details are discussed, exactly what is Viveka, what do we need to do, and how it should. So the Vairagya is a self-test. Really. No one needs to test. You are your own self-test taker. No one is going to give you a degree and say, you know what, you have become a very wise man. No. Your only family, and also my family doesn't care what I'm learning and teaching or anything like this. All they want to see is he behaving as when there is a birthday party, they want me to show up. Really, I'm telling you. I'm under a lot of pressure. Parties, that I have to go to parties. If the dishes have to be washed, dishes have to be washed. You cannot say, oh, my husband is, this great Vedanta teacher, and he doesn't have to wash any dishes anymore. My wife will throw me out. Nothing like that happens. It is all internally your own vivek. And so what you have to do as you progress in this is to self-evaluate. Self-evaluate means what? Self-test means what? It just means, really speaking, is my joy independently coming from myself, or do I have to depend on outside things? And to what degree my outside things are controlling me. If I have to do a lot of things to be happy, then I am not yet there. If I have to do less things in order to be happy, I'm making progress. This is the inner test, and that is the litmus test of Vairagya. That's why all of our teachers say that if you think just leaving your household and living in an ashram with ochre clothes and so on and so forth, if you think this is Vairagya, this is wrong. Because life in an ashram is even harder. Swami Paramarthananda was saying, he says that one of the, he's of course a very evolved teacher, wonderful teacher. And so he says and a lot of the Swamis come for him advice. So he says one of the Swamis came to me and he said, Swamiji, as a sannyasi, you are not supposed to, you are supposed to be, you don't order things on your own. Whatever is given to you, This is the theory, is what is called bhiksha. Bhiksha means that whatever is given to you, you just eat. You don't then say, I want 3 rotis, and I must so much rice, and I should have 3 or 4 different things. No. So this Swami came to him and said, Swamiji, I am not getting enough bhikshas. So how do I get more bhiksha? Swamiji says, listen, you think your life is difficult and then taking sannyasa is easy? Look at this person. You can at least just open the refrigerator and eat anything you want to. You can even, if you want, you can even eat chicken and hamburgers. You shouldn't be doing it, but you can do it. Look at this guy. He has to sit there. If nobody brings bhiksha to him, he goes to hungry. He just drinks another glass of water, that's it. So he says this external sannyasa doesn't mean anything. Life in ashrams are very difficult. In fact, it's interesting. There's politics in all these ashramas. So what happens is that in the home, if there is a problem, you take it out. Supposing that happens all the time, my wife will say, hey, I tell my younger son sometimes when he comes in with this, hey, you didn't wash your dishes. Why are you leaving them on the sink? He says, oh, I forgot. From tomorrow on, please don't leave them because it's not a good idea. Everybody just washes their own dishes and so on, okay? If you're in the ashram, you cannot say that. If somebody leaves dishes in that, you cannot say, hey, you're not supposed to do this. You just quietly do what you need to do. Life in ashrama is not easy. So what it means is, Krishna says, this is what explained in the whole Gita. Outer renunciation is not important. It is the inner renunciation that matters. And so this whole teaching of Viveka and Vairagya and so on forms the very content of the Bhagavad Gita. So with that, I haven't quite figured out, I think I'll go further with this whole thing and possibly go into the 7th chapter. I think I'll summarize the first 6 chapters maybe in a class or 2 and then go into the 7th chapter. This is what our class number 7, is it?
Yes.
7? Oh my gosh. Almost half over. I don't have much time. I may ask for your permission to go over 16 by a couple of classes. Or the other thing is that we don't completely cover the 7th chapter. It is more important that we have the background towards the Bhagavad Gita. Anyway, we'll discuss it and we'll get your counsel also. So we'll proceed along that. So with that, let's say a small prayer and then ask for any questions that you have. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Any questions I can answer? Yeah.
You mentioned Bhagavad Gita is meant for people like Arjuna but not Duryodhana.
Correct, yes.
So Duryodhana cannot get any good out of
No, but Duryodhana has to get counsel from people that will tell him to behave himself and quit lying and cheating and killing people and so on. So that doesn't require any deep thinking. It's very obvious. you know.
So he won't be able to learn anything from his actions, will not be any Atma Vidya or anything?
Atma will, the actions will not lead to Atma Vidya. His actions will be much more,
Vicious or whatever. And
yes,
he
so that
not
is
able to
correct,
see
right?
himself.
Yes. He'll have to wait. It's kind of like if you have a lot of problems in life, you have to just wait. You cannot listen to the finer things.
Who can advise him and bring him back? Or?
No, but I mean the thing is then elders of the society have to tell him that. It has nothing to do with any spiritual teaching.
If he's willing.
If he is dharma, a teaching of dharma will be that is all that is required. Yeah.
So essentially when you say for Grasta, Bhagavad Gita is something like a war going on in your own mind, for a Grasta normal, for his normal
Correct.
life. And he has to face it with a proper ethics to know himself.
Yes, yes. That is correct. That's how that would be.
And so when somebody becomes gnani, it means he has his full self-knowledge?
That is how the word defined is defined. Although we will discuss it more, jnani means that you may know the theory, but you have not applied it to yourself yet where you are completely free. So that stage also comes. And so the word jnani depends on whether you are asked to completely done or is it partially done. Those two things have to see. Yeah, Raji?
Can you explain how Seva helps Viveka and Vairagya? Tomorrow is Sevathon. I thought I will invite everybody with family and friends to come and hang out there with us, make it a family outing. But how does, I see the effect, but I didn't understand how.
I think seva means that first of all it is consistent with dharmic actions. It is dharma. And all dharma is a prelude to moksha. And so from adharma comes dharma. So it's in that direction. And also the emphasis on selfishness, not helping anyone else except myself, also impedes the progress of looking at the larger aspect of it. So, Swami Dayananji had once said, he says, there's a person who may say, I love humanity, but I hate people. And that doesn't make any sense. So you have to really have a sense of seva as well to have that. Sorry, we don't have any people. They've all left. So
No, I announced last week when there was a bigger crowd, but I also wanted to understand what is happening. I see the transformation, but I didn't understand how exactly it's happening, how it is giving more Viveka and Vairagya. But I do see more Viveka and Vairagya.
yeah, it's a progression.
Seva